All right, good morning. I think we're ready to get started on the next phase of today's session. I'd like to bring up to the stage and introduce Matt Bynick. He's the Business Analytics Manager at PNC. He looks over all data and data projects in C&IB, or Corporate and Institutional Banking, and at AMG, or the Asset Management Group of PNC. He is the strategist behind bringing big data into corporate and institutional banking for PNC. He always says, drive data into action. And I'd also like to welcome Sandeep Tagliaros. He's the director at CGI. Started his career with data and worked in various data projects and at different clients, including UPMC, First Niagara Bank, and for the past 7 years, he supported PNC. It's a blend of traditional and big data experience. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is the mic picking us up? Is it picking us up? Is it working? All right, cool. And I'm just going to kind of move around here, so it's kind of the way that I roll. But first thing I want to do is thank CGI for inviting C&IB and PNC and AMG to come this morning to present kind of our view on big data analytics, where we're at, how we think about our approach as we move forward, and making sure that we have a structured approach with the way we're thinking about it, right? It's easy to think about big data as, hey, it's going to cure all ills, it's going to cure all cancer, it's going to allow us to do things that we just weren't able to do in a traditional environment, which it will, but you have to have a structured approach with how you're going to bring it forward, while at the same time still answering current business problems, current business questions, right? You can't wait. We live in a dynamic business environment that requires action, as he mentioned, data into action. So I appreciate the time, appreciate CGI inviting us. CGI has been a critical partner as we think about bringing our standard and big data strategy forward. And we look forward to many years of continued support. In addition, I want to thank Sandeep, since I'm standing up here with him. He is our data architect across our environments, and he is critical to the overall success for C&IB and AMG. That's Corporate Institutional Bank and Asset Management Group. So two of the three businesses within PNC. And he brings high intellect, technical skill, passion, innovative and progressive thought, which is what you need in this space, right? So a lot of our successes that we have to date are because of the guys on the team like Sandeep that are able to bring this stuff forward, right? I'm just the guy that comes up and talks. So starting with the presentation, we can flip to the first slide. So this, what is Hadoop? And I don't think I have to go into a lot of detail with this group. I think we are pretty well aware of what it is and what it can do. I think it started with 3 Vs. I think it's went to 4 Vs. I think it might be 10 Vs from articles that I've seen recently around the value and the capabilities that it offers. But I think value is the key component here, right? When I think of Vs, I think of it has to be, it can do volume, it can do variety, it can do velocity, right? But it has to be able to give us value, right? If not, then we just have some data scientists sitting in a back room that are exploring the data, but they're not actually focused on the right tasks and the right questions to drive the value back to the business, right? So the way that we think about it is very value driven. And what can we do, right? When we look at the domains and we look at the potential, and we've jumped into some of these verticals here already, and be able to provide value and benefit back to the businesses. As we think about building recommender systems and how we view customer behavior and how we can give insight back to the sales teams on, you need to recommend these products or have these conversations with these customers because of what the current state is or what the current behavior is. Moving in, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, right? Real-time analytics and where we want to be and how we live in a dynamic environment. We need data in real time to the individual that needs it when they need it. So that's a very core piece to what we're doing. So the value proposition, I think, is clear. It starts with cost reduction, at least from a mindset. Obviously, the capital expenses up front are heavy as you build out the infrastructure, but over time, there should be a cost reduction plays as we think about how do you streamline processes, streamline data flows, as well as data storage. The big value for the business, right, is the ability to have insight, to have data that's available as they need it. So it gives us the ability to automate some of the decision making or provide the right information when the decisions need to be made. So that is the huge value proposition as we see it. And it gives us the ability to be more innovative, right? So if we better understand who our customers are, what activities and events are happening around them, then we're better able to support their needs, and we're better able to design and define new products that address the overall needs of the customer. So that's all great, right? But change is hard, right? And I think this slide has probably been used before in many presentations, but it's when Sandeep and I sat back and thought about where we're at in the journey, this is a true statement, and will continue to be true because the potential is clear. I think we can all see the potential for what kind of value it's going to bring, but how do you execute around it? And it starts with culture, right? The culture at a large organization is complex to change, right? And you have a lot of individuals across the organization, whether they're on data analytics teams in the business, or whether they're in technology, or whether they're actually in the business looking at reports. Changing and evolving is a slow process, right? And you have to be very focused on how are you managing change, and how are we progressing the organization forward. In addition, it's just the overall policies and practices of implementation have not evolved as quickly as some of the technologies, right? So, so we're continuously kind of running up against requirements that, our competitors in the fintech space are not going to be running into, right? So it slows the capability and progression of what you can do and how fast you can do it. We just have to be mindful of it and have to continue to press forward and look for new ways to do and manage current processes, right? So how do we think about, the other thing I want to mention on that last slide was it comes down to people, right? So you can have the best infrastructure and you can have culture around it, right, that's progressive, but if you don't have the right skill sets and talent, it's a huge need, right? And everybody's looking for it, so it's hard to resource, but it's critical, right? For us, we have individuals on the ground in the business that have been there before, that have implemented, large-scale big data analytic environments. So we really think that we understand architecture and implementation and our ability to articulate back through individuals that may not have as much experience to get us to the right place. If you don't have that, then you're dependent fully on contractors like CGI, but we like CGI. But you have to have your own internal talent to be able to be successful, right? That's really going to understand the business, understand our data architecture, and understand our practices. You got to have that key component. All right, so foundations for success, right? So we kind of break it into 4 components, and it starts and ends with a data architecture strategy, right? So as we thought about CNIB 2 years ago and launching this strategy, it started with you have to have a definition around a customer and account, right? And you have to have a structured data set to be able to build all your analytics around it, right? So you have to take a directed and dedicated focus to what do you want the architecture to be. If not, in the current environment with labs, right, and the availability of data and the quick capability to bring it into an environment, you just end up with data swamps, right? You end up with not a well thought out architecture, and we see it, right? We've seen it internal, we've seen it external, that it just becomes a dumping ground for data. So everything in that environment is single use, right? What we have to do is create a data set that is repeatable, right, and can be replicated across many use cases. And this is the way we've thought about payments, ACH, wire, check, for our customers to be able to create a consolidated data set for many, many use cases. It's not singular to one use case. That's critically important. Data capabilities for core users, right? So we're talking about an evolution, but we have to remember the people in the evolution have to answer current business problems, right? And data may not be available in a big data environment. Some of the tools may not be available, right? Some of the open source libraries may not be available for easy consumption. In some cases, they don't have the right skill level to be able to use the environment, right, as we kind of evolve. we have to make sure that as you go through the journey, that you don't forget that while you're building shiny objects, that you have to keep the lights on. And you have to do it in a way that you're providing additional capabilities to your core data analysts because they're your lifeblood. They're interfacing with the business every day, right? I can stand in front of executives, we could talk about what they want. At the end of the day, it's the data analysts that are working directly with the business teams, the underwriting teams, the operations teams, the risk teams to define use cases, to create base reports, to create ad hoc analysis, which evolve into big data use cases, right? We gotta have a remained focus on that. You have to have a structured analytics, advanced analytics program that has a focus on talent, that has a focus on how do you manage use case development, and how do you bring that stuff to life from an execution standpoint. If you don't have a good business-centric program, and you're fully reliant on centralized support teams, which we have, and they're great, right? From training and infrastructure support and et cetera. But you need to have, if you're going to manage your own use cases, you cannot put them in a big bucket from a business perspective into an enterprise-wide bucket to be managed, because you're just not going to be able to drive the execution and the value proposition out of the work. And then data distribution. So you can do all sorts of fun, new analytical insights, machine learning routines. Hey, here's a new insight on your customer. Here's what we want you to do. Here, we're going to automate this decision for you. You can do all that, but how do you deliver that information? And how do you deliver it in a centralized, consistent way? Right? To me, it's like you can build all this, but if you don't think about what is the user experience around the receipt of the information, then they're going to be getting data from many different places, which is how their experience works today. So it has to have a very focused distribution strategy with data out. So in a deeper sense, we'll walk through each one of these. The way that we've thought about it in CNIB and AMG, right, as we've built out CNIB over 2 years. AMG is about 3 months into their journey, so we're early days. These don't have to be an environment. These are the pillars of how we need to structure the architecture.
So what we're saying here is, we spoke about data swamp in the morning, and even Dave spoke about data swamp in the morning, right? So we should not be thinking big data as a big data lake where you just dump data in the raw format and have it there and expect people to work on it, use it, and generate reports. No. You still need to have the data in the raw format, but we have to think about an architecture where we are talking about traditional analytics, right? Like lights on. We still need to have those. You need to create a traditional analytics structures. We need to have an operational view where we can connect the real-time view. So there are different audiences, different use cases for the type of data that we're bringing in. We need to think about it before we go and jump on bringing data in and thinking about a big data program, right? So traditional analytics data, you have to have an operational view of the data, and then comes the deeper insights. Once you have those two corrected, then you can run your all algorithms, do your machine learning or hi-fi stuff that's happening around, and then bring or get the insights out of it, right? Rather than just, again, building a swamp, you need to build it in a structured way.
Yeah, we don't get any value out of the advanced analytic environment, right, that sits on Hadoop, if we don't have who is the actual customer and what is the definition of an account, right? We have to have those relational data sets, and the way that we've built our data, our CNIB data mart that sits on Teradata, that's managed by this guy right here, we bring it down into our analytics environment, because that's a core function, a core asset, core component of how we manage our analytics strategy, right? CDM on CDI, right? Yeah. The operational mart, so if this is who the customer is, then we have to understand everything that's happening around the customer over time, right? And we think about this as very much a manufacturing data model around operations. I mean, obviously it has a lot of different use cases around it, but it's centered on operations because it's very much about how do you manage capacity and demand and utilization across the business process, and how can you move individuals around or processes around to create streamlined processing. So this is all about managing through operations, but it's going to give us additional information around our customers, which will allow us to do advanced insights. So the way we think about it is customer, right, on the 360 degree, they process ACHs. We would know that in CDM or 360. But an operator in operations gets the request, has to take an action, processes through the ACH through the window, and there's a time component there. How long did it take them, right? We have to be able to understand that. What was the quality around that execution? In our analytics environment, we would know that that ACH was processed. It was processed on this day. It was processed by this customer. It had this effect on the account. This customer processes that kind of transaction over many different time periods or on set dates to particular customers, so we can better understand the relationship between customer A and customer B, and whether customer B pays customer C in a different payment method, and the power around the ability to understand what our payment network looks like. So it kind of gives you a flavor for one transaction and how it lives in a structured way through our environments.
Yeah, so dimensions to that now, right? You are giving a lot of transactions. You can go to the core like IoT. Yeah, once maybe in future, right? We might bring IoT data and then plug it here, or a Facebook data. We showed in the first slide, right? So we have a lot of potential. You can bring unstructured data, bring it here, put it in your operational view. Combining those two, you can run your machine learning and all the algorithms and get the insights.
Okay. So to the support of the core data analysts, right? So this is the component that isn't necessarily big data related. It's all about extending capabilities while we're evolving for those data analysts that are living either in a centralized data analytics team like myself or inside the business. Data is an asset, right? We should not be building perimeters around our strategic assets. We've done that in the past. We've made getting the data very complicated, very difficult, right? So it ends up being data into a spreadsheet to a manager, right? Like that's over, right? We shouldn't be doing that. So we've seen over the last 5-10 years, right, the evolution of visualization and the ability for a business-centric user to create Tableau views and distribute them, as well as having other tool sets available. But we got to continue to extend that, right? We got to bring forward data prep capabilities. We're using them on a smaller scale without enterprise licensing on them yet, but bringing forward the ability to prep, cleanse, organize, and distribute the data across many sources, right? Because we still, even though we have our strategic assets, that's not where all the data lives. We still have to cross sources to bring data forward, and we still have a lot of manual processes that include manual outputs, right, into spreadsheets that need to be connected to our output data, right? So we got to live in the real world while we're building the future state. Extending visualization capabilities, right? So Tableau is great, but we need to venture forward into other visualization capabilities, some that are going to be for real-time analytics, some that are going to give us the ability to embed and distribute them through web-based technologies. So we got to continue to give power to the core analyst to be able to build and distribute. And then data cataloging, right? So the ability to search through the data, find what you need, understand what that data is, so that they can build the right reports, right? It has not been a clean world. So you have many definitions by many individuals building their reports, which leads to different answers, right? If you get into a true kind of data cataloging with data dictionaries, I own data governance as well, so I care about this stuff. That it's going to be much more organized. Things are going to be easier to find. It's going to increase productivity, and it's going to enhance consistency with the way we think about it. Those are just examples, and we're taking action around all three of those to continue to enhance the tool set for the core analyst. And I just think it's critical in thinking about it from a business perspective. We can go talk about Python and R and advanced techniques all day long, but we need to ensure that the guy that just needs to run a report has the capabilities at his fingertips.
Yeah, so what are you saying again is from the tech side of it, right? Is that when we talk about big data, right? Again, we are talking about our advanced scientists or advanced analysts who are running. No, we have to use the platform for catering our core analysts as well, right? How do we do that? That's the key, right? It's not just like, again, a lot of structured, unstructured data, running algorithms. No, it's not only that. Our core analysts also need extended data sets, right? So that's what we are trying to help them give here, and what are the tools they need, and what do we need to do for them to be successful on this platform, right? We don't expect everybody to have a big data knowledge or do all these tools, right? Again, so we have this enhanced availability as data as a service, right? So what are we doing here? We know what kind of data sets these analysts will be using, And with our experience with working with them, we now know that, okay, they might need an LOB, they might need hierarchies, right? They might need the structured data or a client relationships, right? So we are building those structures predefined for them and making that available as a service, right? And it's ready to order. So as an analyst, I'm building a product, I'm building something for my business users, right? Now I don't need to go and search, go to technology, talk to them, give me this data, it takes a month, right? No. Technology is doing this pre-hand, making it pre-ready for them. So whenever they want, they'll just go and check, okay, I need this LOB data. Now it's available to them. 4 checkboxes, 4 of the data is available to them. They are writing a block of code, a technology group productionize that code, it's ready to use, check it, it's there. So building a product and using and speeding up their analytics or the program that they're writing is much faster and better now.
Yeah, I mean, when you're improving productivity and you're expediting report development, right, by creating these data structures that are ready to order, we think it's critical to the long-term strategy on how do we get the data fast and how do we get an answer fast, right? Like the days of, taking 3 months, which I think is long, but even 6 months and 9 months to create a report for the business doesn't work, right? Like, I can't even believe that still exists, right? Like, the business needs an answer now. It may not be 100% there, but you got to get 90% so that we can take action around it, right? We need to be able to do this quickly. We live in a dynamic environment, and what I've seen in the past, it takes 9 months. By the time you get it built, they've moved on. They have a new challenge. So that answered question 1. Now they need to answer question 2. All right, so it's all about speed to market. And then culture of collaboration. So we're very focused in creating a collaborative environment, a community of analysts across CNIB and AMG, right? So that they have an organization, they have a community of other analysts that they can lean on, that they can crowdsource ideas, they can do some code golf, they can talk about what approaches they want to take, how do they want to build a report, they can share. We got to give them the right formats and forums for that, right? And I've taken some of my senior analysts on my team to lead those strategies to ensure that we're connected out through who we think these main data consumers are at an analyst level, to ensure that we understand the needs, we're serving them well, and they have the right community and connectedness to other analysts to be able to source what they need. Anything else you want to add?
Yep. So again, widgets and internal libraries, I just want to reiterate that. So we create libraries, and like the analyst group, right? We are expanding the group, and now when one of the analysts is creating a library or a product, we are making it have like similar to open source libraries. We are also creating internal libraries as well for all the analysts to go and use it, right?
Okay. So while you're continuing to expand on current capabilities, right, you got to focus on where could they go next, right? And they can continue to answer current business questions, but now we got to give them the ability to ask questions to explore the data, right? If they're really going to evolve into what we think a core data analyst is going to be in 2020, we have to make this evolution, right? And by building off of our architectural strategy, right, we should be able to give them a new 3-dimensional way to think about data, right? So that in the past, they would think about, I have a traditional structured relational data set that I can look at a customer and account through time, and I can build trend lines, and I can understand how that has migrated or evolved over time. Well, now we don't just know the state of a customer account at points in time. We know everything that has happened at any given time around that customer account, which may not even be dependent upon that customer account, maybe dependent on something that happens externally or something that happens internally that just is associated with the customer, which gives you so much more power in the way that we think about this visual and their ability to access the information, to run some advanced queries, to be able to pull information out of the data to serve the business. Because again, these guys are interfacing with the businesses directly on a daily basis. So these kind of questions are going to come up. We got to give them the capabilities, and we are methodic about how and who we give access to in our big data environments. It is not free reign. We do hold that pretty close, that we're not just going to open up the gates, because you end up with all sorts of messy data. Yeah. That isn't where we want to be. So at the same time, we're obviously going to increase the frequency around the analytics and the ability to real-time visualization as we think about where we're going to take our current POCs and how we're going to take that forward. Got to continue to strengthen and streamline the availability of open source tools, right, as we ramp them into more advanced tools. And then it requires training, right? So we're focused on continuing to scale up our existing staff, with focused training around advanced tools and around the Hadoop ecosystem. But it requires that dedication. It requires an intellectual curiosity on their part as well, right? If they're not going to be curious and explore and take some time outside of work to think about it and learn some of this stuff, potentially build something at home on their own, I think it's going to be hard for them to evolve over time. But we need to be dedicated as management to ensure that they have the resources available to grow. Anything else?
Yeah, think about like a traditional slice and dice, right? So we all know how reporting works and all that stuff, right? You do slice and dice. But what's happening now is with a traditional line where you do the slice and dice and look at the customer at a single attribute, right? Now we are able to ingest multiple points when we want and how we want and change the way the results are coming out, right? And then analyze those results. That's what the ability that we are getting and we are giving to the analysts now with big data.
So how do you manage a advanced analytics program, and what are the key facets to drive the strategy forward? It starts with talent. I mentioned before, you got to have talent. You got to have someone that's been there before. I think all the businesses are, dependent upon contractors at this point, whether it's CGI, Cloudera, EPAM, et cetera, and we'll continue to be so for a period of time. But we're, continuing to work and source internal talent. But you got to have some individuals on the business side and on the tech teams that are internal to the business, that know the technology, that know how to implement it, that have seen it done successfully before. If not, I just think that you're setting yourself up for issues and failure. Additionally is use case development. So use cases, I hear it every single vendor that comes in. Oh, give me some of your use cases, right? Let's talk about use cases, right? So everybody wants to talk about use cases, and I can come up with 1,000 use cases, right? But are they the most critical to the business, right? Are they the most valuable at this particular moment that need focused and attention? So it has to have true and heavy business engagement, right? Back through the businesses, right? At a senior executive level, down to a senior management level, down to just an individual salesperson. We got to be able to have the conversation to understand what the needs are, so you can focus and prioritize the right work sets. Because we have a limited number of resources in the big data space, right? A limited number of data scientists as we kind of build out that practice. So you have to ensure they're focused on the most critical needs. And then capabilities, right? So we need to continue to progress and create capabilities and ensure that they're available to be able to use the environment.
Yeah, so good use case, right? I want to just stress on that point. Coming from technology background, when I'm writing a code, when I'm understanding something and then trying to convert that into technology and a product, right? Your end goal in technology depends on what you're getting, right? So that's a use case we're talking. If you don't work on the use case upfront with the business, and we might have like 100 uses coming in, right? So what is that we are doing in technology? We can't just go and jump ahead on work on all 100 use cases. We need to take those use cases and see what is being supported by technology, platform, again, resources, everything, right? We have to have a goal on what is a doable use case and go behind that and then extend from there, right?
And when we do a use case, right, we think about the architecture.
Yep.
So it's not just going to be built for that individual use case that
Exactly.
is, right?
So your architecture has to support that, or you have to take those which are supported by the current architecture and then see ways on how to go beyond that.
Mm-hmm. So where are we at? What do we think, right? Obviously, you want to think big in how you want to bring this stuff forward. I think we have many use cases in data products in flight. The way we think about single entity data products around, I need to understand X, generate insight around it, deliver it to the individual that needs it around a product manager, et cetera. But the big ticket items with the way that we think about it and what we're trying to bring forward is real-time capabilities, right? And obviously it's a reality, right? And we need to bring it forward and make it available through our internal environments because that's going to turn data into action, right? So we have to move away from creating reports, sending reports, opening reports, looking at reports, determining what needs to be done, going back into a system, taking the action, processing it to the next step, right? It's got to be, here's what you need to know right now, click, action, back to system, right? Like that's the kind of, big use case or big capability that we're trying to create. It has all sorts of mini use cases around it. And obviously speed to market, right? The way we think about development is the prototyping in our production-based labs. So we can create, we can pilot, we can prototype, we can pilot, and then we can work through the production-based processes.
Yeah. So again, we have unknown results from the known data, right? A lot of people say unknown results from unknown data. No. Again, we have to go back and understand. We have data. It's not big data is new as a platform, right? But data is old. We have data from last 15 years, 20 years in the bank, right? So that's a known data. We already have it. But now with this capability, what are we getting out of it is unknown results, right? Like again, if a flat slice and dice in a 2D, now made as 3D. Now you're slicing it with different vectors. So what are you getting? You are getting unknown results, which will be a benefit to the end user, right? We are posting it to them and helping them to use the data when they are talking to the customer, when they are making the transactions, right? Helping conversations and helping them help the customers, right? So that's getting unknown results out of known data. And again, there is unknown from unknown data too, but that's a way long, and you need to do deep learning and a lot of other stuff has to be done, which Chris spoke in the morning, right? So now it's all business, right? Again, we saw that. What is that for a technology translation like a guy like me, right? So we are talking about different source systems and different transmission needs and different consumption needs. So I would like to always tag them into one of these, and then so that way it's easy for me to write the architecture and work on that, right? So we have files, APIs, databases, MQs, unstructured data, like social media. We are not at there, so that's why I didn't put it there, but unstructured data from a lot of networking sites and all the stuff. And the transmission needs. One of the use cases is real time, right? And Matt spoke about what is that real time will help us and how it will help the users, right? Real time. Batch, a traditional batch processing, runs overnight or once in a day or 15 days and monthly. And a micro batches, which will run every 1 hour with the same real time data, but we don't want to put it a real time. It's not a need, right? And the consumption needs, standard consumption. You build reports in OBIE, Tableau, and then push it out through emails as a PDFs and all that stuff. And analytical reporting. So that's where our business users will take the data who are advanced, right? We are not pre-building the reports. They are trying to build the reports using all the new tools that they have. Tableau is one of the examples, or OBI, right? They're going to do analytics on the data, analysis, and build analytics on the data and push it to the users. Real-time alerting and presentation. That's what Matt spoke about, right? Something is happening on an application in the front end. How does that data come into the data? What are the repository that we're building? What is happening on the data? What are the actions that has to be happening on data? And push it back to the user as another alert, right? Mm-hmm. Chris spoke about one of the example too. You bring the data in, you run your rules, and you have to push it back quickly to the user. So when we say that, we are building two kinds of models, right? One is a light model and one is a heavy model. One of the audience asked this question too. If it is a heavy model, how would you even run it with such a speed, right? Fast. No. That's why we have to have a light model and a heavy model, where a light model will run immediately, push it back to the user, where a heavy model will run in the back end, which will be appended later, extra additional information to the user.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you say batch, I hear data replication, right? As we move batch process from one system to the next system, to the next system. And then when you look at it, from a data consumption standpoint or a data analyst standpoint, I have one field 18 times from different systems. So what's the source system, right? Like, so our ability to move towards data streams and connect that data together for distribution, I think is going to be critically important from a data governance standpoint.
Yeah. And immutable data stream for multi-pattern consumption. So I'm building up for my next slide here. We'll see what I mean by the multi-pattern consumption and the immutable data stream here. So most of you might have heard this word Kafka, right? He's a literature guy, but then we use Kafka. Kafka is a new technology. It's an open source technology built in LinkedIn by a few folks, and now they came out and they have a company called Confluent. But we are using that Kafka as a technology, right? So what it does is it's a basic pub sub. You might have already been using it in your organization or in your technology stack, right? But how we are using, or what the idea is here is, what the idea here is, you want to use Kafka as an extended real-time data sink, right? What does that mean? Multiple source systems are loading the data using Flume or different real-time streaming technologies into Kafka. Once it is in Kafka, right, it is now available for every consumer to consume in different consumption patterns. It can be an API, it can be a REST service, it can be your own consumers, or you can tag that to the portals, right? Two things are happening here. One, we are putting Kafka in between as a communication channel, right? So data is coming in, it's going to an operational mart, which we spoke, the traditional analytics mart, and it's also going to the operational mart and analytics mart both. And if it is a real-time report, right, that's a real-time analytics which Matt was talking. We have to push the data back to the user when an action is happening. You are getting the data into Kafka, you are running your rules and pushing it back into your portals, right, through any of this. What is extended sync? Okay, that's normal. Kafka does that. So the default for Kafka is 7. We can make it 30, depends on your platform supportability and your size, right? Again, depending on that, you can make it 30 days, and then you can push your archive into that. So data comes in. There are 3 different kinds of consumers. One is a real-time, a micro-batch consumer, or a batch processing consumer, right? Everyone is getting the same data. We are not replicating data. We are not storing it, bringing all the million rows back and then running it. No network latency, right? We are not doing all the stuff. It's all available in one place. It's a basic pub sub model, but we are extending that as a sink, right? Integrates into Hadoop. You all know, I don't need to run through what Hadoop does as a platform, right? Kafka just integrates into Hadoop platform. It gets all the characteristics. So data is dependable. It's there. You have replication. You have redundancy, all the stuff, right? It's all built into Kafka as well. And store data in the topic, we are just storing it physically. If you go to traditional IABs where we are writing pub subs, right? We are getting data, we are putting it, or somebody's asking, it is running data and bringing it. We are storing the data in an immutable state in Kafka. So there are 3 consumers, even though 3 are real-time asking the data, they are going to get exactly same data, right? If you're building 3 reports out of it in 3 different applications, all 3 are going to see the same data in the same way, right? That's what's a big challenge, where you have multiple data silos and you don't know what a ETL mapping might have done while reading data from that place and then loading into their data silo and then showing it. So that's the data redundancy part, right? We are taking care of data redundancy part as well here. Mm-hmm. Again, we spoke about DAS. We are using Kafka. Again, we are taking that streams, I told you, right? So there are streams where you can pick and choose. We are providing them through Kafka. Why Kafka, right? We can give them directly access to our data stores. No, we want to have them accessing it through a single point, immutable state, single point of truth, right? That's, again, we are building an DAS MQ there. Again, if you see all this, where I'm going is, I'm building an abstracted data exchange layer, right? You're not seeing it. Multiple portals, multiple applications, multiple data silos. You're seeing one place where I'm abstracting the data exchange happening between all of those.
Yeah, for multiple data consumers, right?
Yep.
Could be for an end user that needs it to perform an action in an application or an activity, or an individual that needs the source data for reporting.
Yep. So that's a cycle of use case that we spoke about. So we have source systems coming in, a real-time batch data. Real-time goes into Spark. We run it overnight. A lot of rules run, and then we put it into Hadoop. We run cubes and all that stuff. Real-time comes into Kafka, and we run the light model, which I spoke about, right? We run our light model rules and push it back to Kafka, right? That's the key. We are not putting it back to the portals directly. We are putting it back to Kafka. So that way, if, again, 3 systems want that similar rule output, it's in one place. Single point of truth, one rule engine, right? And then we are pushing it back to the portal, which talks to source. So why does the portal has to talk to source here? So the idea of portal, right? Again, the data distribution, which Matt will speak in a second, is that we want to abstract all the different applications, right? You've seen PNC Bank evolved for many years. That means we have like 50 source systems. And users take data from one system, read it, put it in another system, and then read it, run some report, extract it, and put it in another system, right? We want to abstract all those, abstract all that exchange of information and how they're acting or how they're interacting with those applications and portals.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it gets back to turning data into action, right? Which is kind of what we're saying here at the top of the slide. I think you've heard me say it multiple times that we got to be able to pull the data through that's required by a distinct role, whether they're in an individual department in operations where they're booking new loans, or whether they're out in the front lines selling prospects and customers new products, or whether they're doing the actual physical underwriting of a new deal, right? We have many roles, they have many data needs, and they live across different systems. But if you have the right architectural strategy, we have the right distribution model, we can distribute what they need, we can allow them to have a self-directed experience on what's most important to them, while running, right, rules across systems that are specific to their role, right, with the rules engine, so that, decisions can be made in an automated fashion with notification back to those individuals that, hey, action has been taken on one of your customers or accounts, right? Review, but they don't need to actually take the physical action, or presenting it to them to say, based on what I see in system 1 and based on what I see in system 2, action needs to be taken in system 3, right? And that way you can do it in intraday, real time, reducing dependency on lots of manual batch processes.
Yeah. And the vision is to have the portal host the widgets, the alerts, and everything. So an analyst will have an access to the portal too, where he can build his product by looking at the widgets, pick and choose, and then work on it, and then create a product quickly, right? And with the data. Now we have the data also available for him in the portal. Data as a service, he has data availability. He has data coming from streams, existing cubes, existing marts, everywhere. It's all in one place.
Okay, so I think this is where you land. When you just think about big data, I'm going to create a bunch of reports and visualizations and insights, and I'm going to send them out to the business. Well, that's just information overload, right? So you're going to have to think about how do you synthesize it, what's most critically important in our delivery mechanism, and how they're actually going to interact with that data, and allow them to do some kind of customizable self-selected experience, right? So the way we think about it is very user-focused, right? So based on the role, based on the level, we would set an experience for those individuals, and based on that, it's very user-focused on what they would need, right? So we can do a base package of alerts, we could do a base package of visualizations, because we have plenty of reports that we know what people use on a daily basis, but they are able to customize what's most important to them, right? They should be able to take an alert and they should be able to customize it, just like we do today on our online banking experience. If I want to know when a deposit is, when money is deposited into my account at a certain level, I can set that alert, right? There's no reason that you can't set those alerts for internal roles based on actions that they need to take, right? So they should be able to set their main screens, they should be able to set the visualizations, they should be able to set their preferences and how they want to be able to receive the data, and that's why you have to do it in a true, web-based distribution model. Just Tableau is not going to do that for you, right? You need a different experience, and we're taking a very UI UX approach to how we're thinking about it, right? What does this person do? What information do they need? Which systems do they interact with? So as we organize all the data from an architecture standpoint, we create the real-time data streams and implement our Kafka solutions and build out the exception rules. How do they need to interact with that organized data set?
Yeah. So the reason why we had the human-centric design is in a world of where we are working on iPads, right? We are trying to develop stuff on an iPad. We don't want to see black and green screens. I still pity airline employees, right? They still have to work on those black and green screens. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to give that modern feel, modern usability to the analysts so they can work on modern technologies and also have a modern feel to all the users who they are serving.
That's it.
Any questions?
I have a question because I have a German mentality. If you have this wonderful data, and let's say my data are in and there's a mistake, how you allow the system that I, as the owner of data, have an entry to correct or delete? Is that foreseen?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would think about it, right, is we can present the data as, this is the element and you're saying it's not correct. There's no reason that we can't take the action there to correct that, right? The way I think about exception rules is if data exists in system 1 and data exists in system 2 and I enter data into system 2 that does not correlate with what's in system 1, that should actually kick out an alert for someone to take the action to ensure that it's corrected. And it should be single-click correction, right, to get the data streams back to the database of record. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, do I have as an individual, for example, the bank, my credit score, something went wrong, but I'm a good customer. So how I get back as soon as possible?
Call the call center. No. Yeah, a lot of what we talked about today was very internally focused, right? Because when we think about how do we need to serve the customer, I think we do a good job of that, right? With online banking and what our portals out are to the customer are. They're well designed, they're well thought out. We haven't done that for an internal experience when we think about data aggregation and distribution. So we're trying to take a focus on how do we recreate the experience internally around data, but it quickly evolves into how do we generate the insights that we can distribute through Pinnacle on the commercial side, online banking on the consumer side.
Yeah, so we have our retail partners too. Maybe next year we'll bring them on. So where they deal with an individual customer and they try to create those alerts and push them to the customers too. But on a different note, right, for your question, so if something like that happens, what is it to the bank? So it's just easy for us to call the customer and say, yeah, there is a mistake and we corrected it, right? But what is that to the bank? We want to see where it happened, why it happened, what is the channel, and build insights out of it, and then use it for internal auditing and also internal processes, right? So that's where the key is. Take that action, take the data and build into action, not only for the customer, for also internal systems. Just one more question. So we don't have any. Or I'll just close with one note. So I worked with a scientific organization back when I was in India. So one of the scientists asked me, when will there be a system which can act by what I'm thinking? So basically he was ordering and he made a mistake. He was like, when can it know? So I said, we might not see that a point where it will happen because you're thinking, but we will definitely see a point where it knows that you made a mistake by itself. That's the machine learning. So hopefully by next year, we will have a good use case to show the results of using this data with all the advanced algorithms and deep learning and bring that use case back to you guys. Thank you.
We better.
And thanks, Jen, and everyone giving us the opportunity. And thanks, Matt, for helping me
thanks, guys.
and take my requests. Thank you.